welcome to my December reading wrap-up. Here I'm going to tell you all about the 12 whole books I read in December. That was a lot of books. I hoped that some were graphic novels and a few were audiobooks, but overall a very good reading month. The first book I read in December is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Overall it was an enjoyable read and it got me really thinking about my own life experiences and regrets and how I can take those regrets and form them into future goals and stuff like that. So the overall plot of this story is Nora, the main character, she finds herself in a space between life and death. And for her, it looks like this massive library. And each one of the books in the library is a different version of her life that she could have had if she had made different choices. And they can range from like a little bit different to vastly different. She gets to open these books and to see what her life could have been. In one life she is an Olympic swimmer, in another she is a rock star because she stuck around with her old band, in another one she only ate toast. At first when she's going through these lives, she's like, oh man, I had this massive list of regrets in my life and like I could have done all these other things, but yet I messed everything up. I'm no good at anything, and she was really down on herself. But going through these lives and seeing the other options she could have, chosen, she slowly realizes, well, maybe these choices weren't actually what I wanted, or maybe I wouldn't have been happier as an Olympic swimmer, stuff like that. This kind of story really felt appropriate for the Christmas time. It kind of reminded me of It's a Wonderful Life, that kind of stuff, and it was very sweet. I definitely cried because it got me thinking of like my life regrets and how I wish I had done better in university, how I wish I went abroad during that time, how I wish I've saved more money, that kind of stuff. And it's nice to read these sorts of stories that make you reflect on your own thoughts and experiences and feelings, and maybe thinking about if your current choices are making you the happiest, and if there's maybe something big or small that you can change to make yourself happier. And I appreciated that about this book. So overall I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's probably closer to a 4.5, but I'm gonna leave it at a 4. This one had a bit of a slow start. If I didn't read it in audiobook, I don't think I would have finished it. This is The Fireman by Joe Hill. So I've had this audiobook for years now. I kind of forgot that I once signed up for Audible and then like deleted the app. So I finally finished listening, or started and finished listening to this book. The first 3 hours were rough. Like, I don't know if it was the person performing the audiobook or just like the story itself. Something about it just wasn't really getting to me. Like, I kind of hated the main character. I thought she was bland and boring and dumb, and her husband sucked ass, and I really was not interested in a story that focused just on her. So Harper is a nurse, and bad timing on my part. I keep picking these books up that are just like too real life. But anyway, Harper is a nurse during a time in which there is a pandemic. And this specific pandemic is of a fungal variety. So basically it's these like fungal spores that are, dispersed somehow. Once you are infected with the spore, you start to get this like dragon scale looking markings on your skin. The end result is you burst into flames. And then you die. So she's living as a nurse during this, and her husband sucks. I could not stand the way Jacob talked. Like, immediately I hated every single word that came out of his stupid mouth. And I wanted him to shut up and never talk again. And I was really worried that the story was going to be how Harper and Jacob mend their relationship, get through all this hardship, and in the end find their love for each other again. Thankfully, that's not what happened. My personal VIP of this story, Renee, came in. She shows up. She's a patient of Harper's that she has to take care of, and she's a very chill lady. I loved Renee. When everyone else was panicking, like once they're infected, they like moved them into this specific ward for the dragon scale people. You could be chilling in bed and then the cot next to you bursts into flame, and that typically set off like a chain reaction. So it seemed to be like when people got into really high stress situations, they would, you know, combust. You know, that would start like, okay, now this person is really high stress because like, oh no, that's gonna happen to me. Ah, and then they get really stressed out and then they burst into flames, and you know, it keeps happening. But Renee, she never got caught up into that. She had her little plants, she had her books, she made like a reading story time for the little children. She was chill and was holding it together. There does come a point when Renee exits the story for a long time, and it was during that time where I was seriously considering just dropping this book altogether. Like, I did not want to follow Harper alone. She gets better as the story goes on, as her character develops an actual character. But until then, I bumped up the speed to 2x speed, which I almost never do. It was necessary because I was not having it. But there's a point where Harper reaches a camp and Renee comes back into the story, and then you get a bunch of other storylines as well. And that's where it finally picked up for me, and it kept my attention all the way to the end. So ultimately, I do think it was worth it, but for me, I could not have done it physical book. I needed this audiobook to help me through it. One thing I want to note is that I actually was really interested in like the lore and like the actual magic system of the spore and the resulting fires. You get to learn a little bit more about how they think it started and how they think it spreads and how maybe people can control it. I really, really was interested in that and how it related to specific characters and how learning certain truths really hurt them, and then later they have to work through those past experiences, learning that truth and overcoming the feelings and memories associated with that to do what is necessary, and that was really cool to see. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was also via audiobook. This one is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Like I said in my previous videos, she has become one of my favorite authors, and I specifically chose audiobook. Even though this one isn't necessarily in verse, it was still very good to listen to. Listening to the audiobook for this one was actually really cool because the book focuses on 2 viewpoints, 2 perspectives of 2 teenage girls, one who lives in New York, one who lives in the Dominican Republic, and I believe Elizabeth Acevedo voices the New York girl, and then someone else voices the one from the Dominican Republic. And when you switch viewpoints, you switch narrators, and I don't know, I think that was a really cool way to really personify and bring to life each of the 2 girls. And these 2 girls have to deal with a lot, so both of the narrators do a really good job at bringing to life those emotions that these girls are going through, because overall this is a very emotional tale of 2 girls who are brought together by fate. A plane crash leaves these 2 girls without a father, and they have to slowly pick up the pieces of their broken lives, and through this turmoil they end up finding out that they are half-sisters. It's a lot. Like, can you imagine having to deal with both the loss of your father, who you've loved your whole life, and then also finding out that he had this whole other family without you that you never knew about, and they are still alive. They are there. Your father is not. You don't have him to go to talk through this, to work through this, revelation. Instead, you have this brand new sister. They have to learn how to lean on each other and decide whether or not they want to be a part of each other's lives. And it was really heartwarming to see these 2 girls finding out about each other. Well, that part, not necessarily heartwarming, but the part where they have to or decide to learn to be closer and how to actually become friends and sisters. And that was really cool. And also just getting to see the lives of their mothers and mother figures and how each girl grew up in a very different environment and have different life goals, and but to each of them there's still very important life goals and how they might help each other strive towards them. Ultimately, it was very cute, and it did make me really miss my sister and my parents. This was the first Christmas that I didn't go home to see them. I only saw them via like a video chat, so it was kind of hard to get through this book just because it reminded me of that, but ultimately it was very cute and worth reading. I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in December was The Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is book 2 in the Red Rising series. I read Red Rising last month and I was so invested in this story and so excited about reading the sequel that I got it like immediately after. And this does pick up pretty soon after they end the first book, and it is a huge like scenario shift. The first Red Rising all takes place on Mars in a battle royale, Hunger Games sort of situation, and the second book completely shifts from that storyline. Instead of having a medieval-ish battle royale going on, Darrow is instead in the academy, which is like a space warfare sort of training school, and we like start with him in this like final battle exam thingy of the academy where his ships are battling everyone else's ships, and it's very different. I really liked how we got to see more of the colors of this world, so more of the colored casts of this society. I did have a question about the blues. So the blues are described as like the techs or like the pilots, and like they work the ships, and they are genetically engineered to be like super logical and precise and focused. Also mostly devoid of like other human traits, like a personality really. Like compared to all of the other colors, it feels like the blues are more stripped of their humanity than everyone else. Like they feel so robotic. And that led me to the question, are there not robots in this world? Like they treat these blues specifically as so disposable. Wouldn't it be more cost effective to just make robots? Maybe? I don't know, I'm just asking. I liked getting to see more of my favorite characters from the last book. Severo is a meme lord and I love it. Mustang is still like mysterious and doing her own thing, and Roke, I'll leave it at that. There was a part of this book, I think they describe it as the Black Rain, when it's like an invading party, like jumping out of planes or something. And it felt very much like a Mission Impossible movie. And that really emphasized how this whole book, this series, has really felt like a popcorn movie, but in a book. And I know, at least right now, there still isn't a whole lot of like depth into this story, this world, but it's a really quick read, and it's just like has really good pacing. It just like jumps you from scene to scene to scene, and there's just so much momentum driving you forward. It's fun. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, this really high literary work. It's just fun. Whenever Fitchner calls Darrow Boyo, I kept like imagining Skelly from Hades delivering all of these lines to Darrow. I couldn't help it. Quick side note, Hades is a fantastic game that came out this year. If you're into video games and you like really good characters, really good story, and addicting gameplay, I highly recommend checking this out. I know a lot of people have really enjoyed it on the Switch. I've played it on the PC with like a PS4 controller, and that really worked for me. I love this game. So please, if you have any interest at all in those things, check it out. When I reached the end of this book, I had some big questions for the third book, which I think is the end of this series. Are there going to be gold characters that end up getting redeemed at the end of this? Because, you know, this whole time we know that these golds are basically evil. Like, just their existence is bad for society. So are we gonna have any of these gold characters like Mustang or Sephiroth or Roke? Are they gonna get redeemed somehow? Like, what is gonna be their role in life, in society, in this world after the revolution? If we get one, you know? I don't know. That's just my question. I have lots of questions that are definitely more on the spoilery side, so I'm not going to address those here. I'm gonna wait until I finish the third book and maybe do a whole video surrounding this series and discussing that. We'll see. Overall, I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read is a thriller mystery sort of novel. I also did this one in audiobook. I think the narration was pretty good. This is Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson. The main plot for this one is this woman wakes up in a strange bed in a strange house, and when she looks in the mirror, she's shocked because in the mirror she sees a 45, 50-year-old woman when she expects to see herself as like a late 20-year-old. So there's these decades-long gap in her memory, and basically she and you both find out that she was in an accident, when she was in her late 20s, and every single day since then, she's woken up without any new memories. So she doesn't remember anything about the accident, so she has like both kinds of amnesia. So she can't remember like a little bit before the accident, and she can't make any new memories. So she's basically starting every day from square one. And in many ways, the reader does too. But slowly, she's recently started work with this psychologist or psychiatrist, this doctor. He is helping her try to regain maybe some of her memories, or maybe just regain the ability to create new memories. So she's starting this journal. So when she went to go get help from this doctor, she did not tell her husband, because when she wakes up every day, there's also this strange man next to her, which eventually she learns is her husband. And for whatever reason, he doesn't really want her getting help. He says it's because they've gotten help before and tried a bunch of different things and it never worked, and it only caused her more stress and mental harm. So that's his reasoning. And during this whole journal writing adventure, she starts to figure out some stuff and starts to doubt whether or not her husband is telling the truth. Maybe her doctor is not being truthful to her, or maybe both or neither. I don't know. Ultimately, I think it was an interesting read. It did have some pretty good twists and turns, and I didn't fully anticipate the ending, although I did figure out one of the twists pretty early on, and I was just like waiting for her to figure it out. Like we both had the same information at that point. I was like, come on. I do think it had a good beginning and a good ending. The middle, when I felt like she needed to go on faster, I felt dragged a little bit, but ultimately it was a fun time, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Hello there, this is Next Day Marcy. I kind of forgot to film one of the books, so I'm gonna do that now. In editing this and figuring this out, I realized that this was gonna be a long video. So I'm also taking this opportunity to split it up into 2. So this is gonna be the last book in this video, and then the next 6 are gonna be in part 2. I hope to get part 2 out by the coming Monday, so at least everything will be out during the same week. The next book is In Holidays by Christina Lauren, and this is, I'm sure you've seen it around if you watch other booktubers. It is a new book this year, and it is centered around Christmas time, and it is a romance. I would not have read it if I had not heard other people that I watch read it and mostly enjoy it. Besides being a romance, it also has a sort of like Groundhog Day thing to it. So instead of repeating like a single day over and over again, the main character seems to be repeating the same holiday week. In this book, a young woman goes to a cabin in Utah with her family. The cabin belongs to a family friend. They have all been getting together for Christmas since her parents were in college, and they've been doing this every single year since. And one of the families that goes there has 2 sons around her age, and it's a romance. So obviously there's gonna be something going on between them. She's been in love with one of the boys since she was like 13, but has never said anything about it. At the end of the week, on the way home to the airport, her and her family get into a car wreck. And when she wakes up, she's back on the plane, but not the one leaving Utah, but the one getting to Utah. And she restarts her holiday week. And it's like really weird, like, oh man, I've seen this all before. And she has to figure out why this is happening to her. I briefly also want to mention a wish I have for this book. But the main character does end up choosing between the 2 brothers. And I wish that there was some time given to the relationship between her and the other brother, because they were friends before this whole trip, and they presumably are going to stay friends after, but there were still some feelings there that don't really get addressed in this book. I personally would have been more satisfied if the authors had given more time to the relationship between the main character and the other brother, not necessarily in the romantic side, but at least to talk through their feelings and maybe re-solidify their friendship. But it's not gonna happen, it's fine. I think the main reason why I picked this up was because I read it the week of Christmas, so right before Christmas, so it was like thematically appropriate. I was in the mood for something like festive and maybe even romance. I was fine with that. And the whole Groundhog Day trope really reeled me in. I wanted to know, ooh, what's going on here? I would say that this story had a pretty strong start, and I was pretty invested in the main character and her story. But when it hit about the like 65% mark, it started to get like abnormally cheesy. Like, I know this is romance, and apparently Christine Lauren, this author duo, are known for, going ham on the romance and the super saccharine part of it. And I before reading this, I didn't know about that, so I wasn't ready for it. And when it hit, it was sickly sweet. It felt like it went from 0 to 60 in like 5 minutes of like in story time. Like it was nuts. And I know they only had like a week of time to work with to develop whatever relationship was gonna be developed, but it still felt really, really fast. And like, even by the end of their trip, that amount of progression was fine. It was fast, but nothing like obnoxious. But then the very end of the book, where they, come back 6 months later or whatever, I like yelled out. I couldn't believe it. Like, they've, made changes to the cabin and like this other spoilery stuff, and it made no sense to me. Like, who would make these choices? And also, even if they made these choices, how could they get contractors up to the cabin to make all of these structural changes to the house? And like, it's winter in Utah. You're not gonna get clear ground free of snow until like May, maybe June. So it was so unreasonable to the point where I was basically completely taken out of the story. I think up until that very end part, I was mostly okay with it and I did enjoy it, but that ending really dropped this book down to a 3 out of 5 stars. And that's where it's gonna stay. Okay, and with that is gonna be the end of this first video. The second half, like I said, is gonna be coming up later next week, so look forward for that. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to my channel. I hope you all have a wonderful week.